you grew up in apartheid South Africa, so that didn't come down, we'll all remember, till '94. Tell us a teeny bit about your family and maybe a faith story, if it was part of your family's life.
Yeah, I don't know if none of you have been to South Africa, especially to South Africa prior to '94. A lot of these things might sound foreign to you, but I was born into an Afrikaans-speaking South African family. So if the way I'm speaking may be a bit too fast, or you're not getting what I'm saying, raise your hand.
You are near New York. It won't be too fast.
So if I need to repeat anything, please just raise the hand. I won't feel bad. People say I've got an accent. I actually do not hear my accent at all. But anyway, so born into an Afrikaans-speaking white South African family in 1971. Went to school at the height of the really, really turbulent years under sanctioned South Africa in apartheid. And my parents, beautiful people, I mean, both of them loved Jesus, wonderful Christian family that I grew up in. But they were staunch members of the National Party in South Africa, which upheld the government at the time. And that's just the way we were raised. We were raised in what is proper, and this is maybe not an acceptable word, but white privilege, and was not aware of it. Was absolutely not aware of it. And I can tell my story just to
go for it.
To tag into that. So I finished high school. I grew up in the same village where I went to primary and high school. Went to study my undergrad at Stellenbosch University after I did my military service, which at that point was still compulsory. Yeah. And in about the second or third year of studying at Stellenbosch, I joined a group, and we were going to do a short-term missions outreach to the northeast of the country. Because that's, if you're a good Christian, that's what you do in your summer holiday, which is winter down south. You go on an outreach, and you go and tell the black people about Jesus, and you go and help them because they live in refugee camps, etc. So, and I'm not saying this negatively. This is just
descriptive. That was
how it was.
Your reality, your ecosystem, right?
And
I'm sure now when you look back on it, you must have been thinking, like, how did I not notice these things, the gross injustices and things?
So we had to raise money to go. So part of how we did it was we collected secondhand clothing, which we sorted the night before, and on a Saturday morning took it down to the town square, and we had tables out, and we had each guy had his bundle, and you were trying to sell these clothes. And obviously you were selling it to non-white people. Because they're the people that would come and buy at the second-hand markets. And I was standing there feeling really good about myself, and an old black lady came up, and she started going through my piles, and I thought, yes, I'm going to make a sale. She pulled out a sweater from the bottom of the pile, and she looked at it, and she turned it around and looked me in the eye, and she said, but it's got holes in it.
But it's got holes in it.
It's got holes in it. And I mean, I'm getting goosebumps now still. I stood there, and it was the end of my day. It was the end of the way I thought of life. Because the reality up until that point, and I think I was 21 years old, up until that point in my life, to me it was okay to think that people that are not white would spend money to buy a sweater with holes in it. And it pulled the rug out.
An epiphany moment.
Absolutely. For you. And it just changed the way I thought about politics, Christianity, my belief system. I mean, it just challenged everything. And I went through a roller coaster of a couple of years of just finding balance and just trying to understand what is truth and not to be condemning the system that raised us and my parents and the way they were thinking, but just coming to grips with reality and what is truth. So, yeah.
Did you go through, I can only imagine that your whole, that gesture of that woman saying, but it has holes in it, that captured you. Did you go then through a period of being angry at God or the church or your faith, or as almost a counter reaction to what you had been raised?
Absolutely. The church that we grew up in was the Dutch Reformed Church, which is a traditional church in South Africa, and part of that realization went with a little bit of a rebellious time of, so everything that is taught in that church is not the real truth. It's got some truth, but not the real truth. So we searched the whole spectrum of what is the real truth, but most definitely it took us a while for the pendulum to come back to the middle again.
Yeah. And you met your wife, Siska, at what point in this journey?
We met on the final year of my postgrad studies on an evening which I started getting involved in a missions organization part-time, and I met her one evening at a prayer meeting, and it was in that time. So it was in that time of searching and
Now, I remember, so you started your career at KPMG, you got your articles, as we would say, a CPA in the States, a chartered accountant. At one point, I remember you telling me that your faith had become so central to you that you wanted to be a foreign missionary. That's often the aspiration of someone who's sort of on fire for their faith. But you had a buddy who was a bit of a truth teller. What did he tell you?
Yeah. He was almost like a spiritual father, in that he was just always a soundboard to me. And it was definitely during the 3 years at KPMG were turbulent years from that regard, in that I was doing my articles and getting my hours in, but my main goal was I'm going to serve the Lord in the missions field, and was very much involved with Open Doors, serving the persecuted church. And I then shared one day with this friend of mine, and I said to him, listen, Niels, you know that as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to become a missionary. And he said, really? I said, yeah. And he actually started a missions organization. He was the head of a Christian-based education.
So he saw a new recruit in you, fresh blood.
And he said to me one day, he said, Ian, I actually don't think so. I don't think so. And to me, it was just like I was on fire. I said, how can you tell me being a missionary cannot be a good thing? How can you tell me? We actually parted ways, where my wife still laughs at me, but for almost a year, I didn't speak to him. Until I got convinced, this might be the truth that he's sharing with me. So, yeah.
It reminds me, there's a friend of mine who's a chairman of a large publicly traded company, and about 10 years ago, he was getting much more active in his faith life, and he said, David, I've got more money than God. I want to go be a missionary. What do you think? And he was expecting that I would say, great idea. And I said, I think that's a pretty lousy idea. I said, you're used to being in charge. You're used to making all the decisions. You've got a little bit of a temper, and you're not known for being patient. Don't think that's
a good mix.
The qualifications to go share faith throughout the world. But I did say, and maybe tell me how you'd react to this. I said, last I looked, you've got 110,000 people that show up to work every day that are under your stewardship. They're under your care. Metaphorically, they're a big synagogue. They're a big church. They're under your care. They're called together, ecclesia, the Latin, the Greek word for the church. And maybe think differently how you treat them and their benefits and their pay and the work conditions and things like that. And that put them on a whole new journey. Wow. What do you think of that?
I think I might have shared this with you when we spoke first, in that time when I was really struggling with it and trying to find balance, one of the things that I became convinced of is that and this is the Ian Haynes theology, the highest calling in life is our individual calling.
Would you say that again?
So I staunchly believe that our highest calling, or the highest calling, is the individual calling that is on my life, on your life, etc. And all of us are on a different journey. So what am I meaning with that? I'm saying, therefore, that being called to go as a missionary to the Middle East, or being called to be a doctor in Syria at the moment, or being called to be a teacher, or being called to be whatever. Everything is the same. It cuts at the same level.
Sort of in God's eyes, in other words.
In God's eyes, it is the same level. And the thing that I found peace in is that we just need to figure out what it is that is our calling, and we need to be obedient to that, because there's a large tapestry, and each individual one of us, with our calling, if we're obedient, you're going to find your little piece of that tapestry, and it's all going to flow together, and the kingdom will come. And it took me a while to really make peace with that fact and to say, well, in missionary terms, missionaries love talking about unreached people groups and where they need to go to the frontiers and whatever. And I mentioned this to you when we just met. And I really believe that the corporate world, right over the world, is probably one of the last unreached people groups. And that's where I believe my calling is.
So you believe you could be called to be a CFO, a data entry clerk, writing code, not the so-called helping professions, but any sort of line of work?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, what do you think about? So I'll tell a story, which is one I'm not proud of, and it's on this theme of calling, because I think we're both trying to elevate work as a calling. I gave a talk once on that to the church Karen and I used to belong to, my wife, and she was in the back row, and as always, she tells me what she thinks afterwards, which I'm appreciative about a day later. And she said at the end of it, I was talking about how work is a calling, just the very things you're saying, which I agree with, and I still do. And she said, she was in tears at the end of the meeting. I said, what's the matter, Karen? And she had recently been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Some of you know Karen has MS. And she's no longer able to work as a result of that. And she was just, if God created someone to be an attorney, a counselor, and a law professor, it was her. She can't do that now. And she said, you had no word for me. And I'm like, wow, she's right. So, yeah, I want to elevate work, but what about someone who's disabled, who's between jobs, who's been laid off, or who's retired and their whole identity for 50 years was their work? Do you think about that at all? Because I still think about that moment, and when I think about calling, that callings can be hard and lonely, particularly when we don't feel where we're meant to be. I think the challenge around that, and I need to articulate myself right now. I don't think all callings or all seasons are easy. The one thing that I really believe in, and I'll try and not digress too much, when I was dating Siska, my wife, we were on another outreach in those days to India, and on the plane back, everybody knew we were dating and whatever. And a girl that I didn't know that well, she came in the plane and she said, "Look, I really believe I need to pray for you guys, and for your relationship." A stranger?
Well, no, she was in one of the other teams, so she was part of the wider group.
Right,
and
I was going to say, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and so she prayed over us, and I was like, okay, listen, and nothing made sense. And she, at the end, she said, I need to, there's a scripture I need to read to you. I really need to read this to you, and it's Jeremiah 33, verse 3, which says, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will show you great and many things which are unknown to you." I was like, okay, you prayed for us for a relationship, and okay, it doesn't mean much, but thank you very much. And she left, and a couple of months later, Siska and I, long story, but we got convinced that we need to get married and put it off any longer. Let's just go through the process. And we got together for a weekend. We were very spiritual about the whole thing. We prayed about it the whole day, and we convinced her it's the right thing to do. And she said, well, no. I said, okay, we need to go. I need to go and ask your dad if it's okay, if I can have your hand in marriage. So Sunday, sure enough, we went there and met her dad and whatever, and this is going to be recorded and she's going to hate me for this, but he really did thank me 3 times for asking for his daughter's hand. So it's a joke that we have between the two of us. But anyway, so we went through that, and this is where I'm getting at now. So remember now, I'm going to take you back. This is the weekend that we set apart to hear whether we should get married or not. Mm-hmm. And these are months after that plane ride where somebody prayed for us. So from her dad's house, we went to Stellenbosch, where that evening the Stellenbosch University Missions Week started. And there's a guy called Floyd McClung who was with Youth with a Mission. He was the preacher that evening, and Floyd, after the worship, he got onto the pulpit and he said, I'm going to read one verse tonight to all of you, and it's Jeremiah 33 verse 3. And I looked at Siska and I was like, this is just amazing. And this is how I got to know the Lord. And that has become our slogan. I mean, whenever there's been tough times, so it took me a long time. Whenever there's a tough time where I don't understand where we are. And I mean, when we went to Jamaica, it was not an easy move for us. It was very tough. And there are days still that it is really hard. But it has been the recipe of our marriage in that we would just call out and say, Lord, this is really not feeling very spiritual at the moment, and it's really not easy. Yeah. What is it that you want of us? And he has just been true to his word, and he's always brought out the why eventually in that.
I really appreciate your candor that it's not easy sometimes. And, from the outside, wow, Jamaica, not bad, as a place to work. But that it has been a challenge, and expatriate life often is. But I appreciate you saying that, because I think some people think their faith, whether it's Christian, Judaism, whatever, but they think that once you're kind of locked in on it, that life is a bowl of cherries, and it's all tailwind and no headwinds. And if anything, the biblical witness, both in the Hebrew Scriptures and the Christian New Testament, says, no, get ready, if anything, for more challenges. The only difference is I'm with you, and there's a reason, and something will come out of this. I'll protect you. So there's a sense of comfort. Absolutely. As opposed to a promise of coasting.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
Hey, let's talk about some ethics issues in business. As I was thinking about your career, on the surface, someone said, well, KPMG, well, there's no ethical issues there. But of course, we know every field has ethics issues, and the PCOAB and others are consistently finding the big four now for different things. But then when you got into the industry sector as a whole, say the wine and spirits and food export business, did you or any of your friends sort of give you some pushback, like, hey, alcoholism, it's a sin stock? Did you think about that or not, or how'd you work through that as a sort of a macro part of your day job?
Absolutely. The most difficult thing is, because I don't have an issue.
By the way, I'm not saying it is. I just put it out there.
Yeah.
That,
so and I mean, Siska and I don't have an issue with wine or alcohol. I mean, we love a glass of wine or a beer. It's not an issue for us. But most definitely, I mean, especially in the circles that we moved in at that time, it was definitely front, and it was almost uncomfortable if you were to meet up with people and you invite people for dinner. It was like, so how do we ask? I said, do we put a bottle of wine on the table, or do we not put it? So it definitely has been a challenge. And I, the long and the short for me on answer to that, if you were to look at, we try and model around Jesus, and when Jesus walked on earth, he most of the time spent time with the people that could throw the best parties in town. And
people forget his first miracle was the wedding of Cana. Where
absolutely, I love quoting that one, by the way. But and that is just. If I can maybe turn my answer a little bit.
Yeah, take it wherever you want, but I just think of the ethical challenges you face, that some are just industry sector issues that might be more prevalent in one versus another.
Yeah. Just quickly, in life first, when I started out first, I chose not to mix with people of similar belief.
Chose not to.
Chose not to. Mm-hmm. Just put it out there. And it was only once we really left South Africa that my eyes opened and I realized what I'm missing in life, and the fact that we can only really be salt and light if you are in a dark place or in a place that needed salt. Because if you are in a light place, they don't need light. So that was a whole new thing for me. On the ethical side, absolutely, it is. Whether it's the wine industry or the hunting safari industry, which I was involved in, and even now Sandals, and the early days of Sandals, I believe, was rather different, I think, to what it is today. In some of the stories that I've.
What were some of the things that were hard for you or troubled you that you've tried to be part of changing?
Fortunately not on the Sandals side. I mean, the early days and the really wildness, I think, have quietened down.
Did you say wildness?
Yeah,
okay.
the wildness.
And we're not talking now about your safari days. You're talking about the resort stays.
Yes. To be honest with you, so I'm on the finance side, and in the financial side, it's slightly different from the operating side. I mean, if you believe that a door has been opened for you and this is the place where you now need to apply your trade and your knowledge, and you believe, well, okay, I'm going to apply what I believe ethically should be done on hunting or on Sandals or in the wine industry, on the whole alcohol abuse. And even earlier, the alcohol side even had the angle that in the apartheid era, a lot of the farm workers were paid in alcohol.
Really?
With wine.
I did not know that.
So that stigma was attached to that as well. So if you believe that you're just going to run into turbulence that you won't be able to help. So or to change. So I decided that I'm not going to really, unless I'm asked for in a board meeting on certain things, I will voice my opinion and then put it out there. And if we agree to disagree, I would just say, guys, just for the record, I cannot agree because I believe these and these and these are the right things, and I would like that minuted. And you would stand down on the issue. And just...
So you raise your point, you argue as best you can, you lose the argument, so to speak, or the debate, but you want it minuted and recorded that you had a different view and why. I mean, that's powerful.
What I've learned in the time, and this is, guys, I want to just tell you guys, I'm a human being like we all are, and we make a lot of mistakes.
Oh, sorry, we only invite perfect people here, so like all of us in the room.
Yeah. So what I've realized is that the world in all industries are hungry for truth and for what is right, and for somebody to stand up for what is right, and for ethics. And
which has nothing to do with religion per se.
No,
it's a human hunger, you're saying.
Absolutely. And then I realized very soon that your oikos, your circle of influence. I mean, this is why I have been planted in corporate business, because you go in there, build relationship, people start understanding you're a person of integrity, person of ethics, right is right, wrong is wrong, you don't bend the rules, etc. And that sphere of influence it's been infectious, especially even in the boardroom. I was sharing with David a bit earlier, said like, the longer people know me, the easier the board meetings become. In that these things most often don't even get tabled because people would understand how you feel about it. So I very soon.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. My father-in-law told me the same. He was a career executive with GE and ran their Latin American operations based in Bogota, and very corrupt issues. Public knowledge is not a big secret, and he had this principle that you could never compromise on taking a bribe, because the minute you did, they always knew you were touchable. And then the only thing is arguing about price. Yeah. But he said the same thing that you just said. He said after a while, and we lost a ton of business because of it, let's be sure. But after a while, no one would approach me because they know you can't touch Mike. And it's something you don't think about. I think in that first key moment when you say yes, no, short-term gain, ends justify the means. And he said, essentially, you said just the same thing, that to become known for something, after a while, some of those temptations, if that's the right word, or challenges won't be put on your plate.
Yeah.
So I appreciate sharing that.
Yeah. Look, and it's not always been, I mean, especially in the time in Africa, in East Africa, and particularly in Tanzania, I mean, corruption is rife. It is part of the business environment. It's part of the government environment. It is just how the whole system works. And if you do not function in that environment, you get sidelined. I mean, I'm sad to say that there were times where I was aware where, the way things have been done, they always would use unofficial channels, and most often you would find out about things later on. And I was thinking about it this afternoon on certain specific instances of what happened in our business there. None of them had lasting fruit, and none of them had an impact that is still lasting today. It was all short-term gain. But as you said, I mean, the moment you lose your foothold, you've got no credibility in the industry. And the people that have been engaged with it, even on governmental side, etc., they've been fired. So it is a sad truth, and it's something that, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not perfect. I mean, it's things that you as CFO, you find out, realize about, this didn't go through my books, but how did you guys do this? And you just ask a lot of questions, you don't get any answers, and it's not something that is great. And if you were saying if there's something I could change, I mean, there maybe a harder line on that would have been more appropriate. I don't know if we would have had a different outcome, but it wasn't great. It was difficult.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because that is the reality. You're trying to run a business, and if the whole ecosystem in which you're operating the business is playing by one set of rules, it's awfully hard. So I don't in any way stand in condemnation, but I applaud you for saying if you could have a mulligans, that would be one. And who knows what would happen. What are some of the issues you face as a leader in the sector you're in now? Because from what I understand from public domain information, the Stewart family are just fine people with great sets of values. They do a lot of things, which Richard mentioned in his opening remarks of adopting a community. You've got a big foundation, which is more than just lip service, from what I understand. Are there other things that, as you think about that, where you feel you're making a difference, or frankly, where it's still tough? Just quickly on, and I'm not going to blow the whistle or the trumpet of the foundation, but it is amazing in that the philosophy that the Stewart family has on Sandals is that because most of these islands, especially in the outer Caribbean, are remote, and employment's difficult, education is difficult, and the philosophy is if a hotel is built in an area, the foundation works in the area where you pull your employees from. And they're doing incredible work with the corporate university, etc. as well. That you can get anything from adult literacy to postgrad degrees that are endorsed by Harvard Business School, etc. It's really amazing the work that they do. So the corporate university, that's funded by the family. By the family.
100% by the family. So that's amazing. But on the and I don't want to make it Sandals specific, but the last few years, and it's been especially prevalent in my role at Sandals, it's been given me the opportunity to step back a little bit and be involved more on the big picture, strategic, etc. side, on business growth, business opportunities, which has been great. But on a personal level, in that, what the mantra is that I've heard from the Lord is, yes, big picture, but notice the little things, and don't
big picture, but
notice the little things. Don't miss the little things. And you might ask what that is, and the reality for me is that it's people. I mean, at the end of the day, our being here is people. It's relationships, and how do you interact with people. I heard a pastor 3 weeks ago, which I shared with David recently, who said that our good conduct should be the greatest apologetic for the gospel. I'm going to say that again. Our good conduct should be the greatest apologetic for the gospel. And what that means is, remember I started with big things, or big picture, small things. In how do I touch people that come across my way? How do I influence people that come across my way? How do I impact needs? The lady who might be working in the kitchen at the office, and she'd come by in the morning and ask me, would you like some coffee? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And she looks a bit down, just notice she's not looking the way she normally looks, and asking and engaging, ministering. Just on that, I'd probably one of the greatest experiences that I had in my career, but just that whole thing of picture small things, in that I sat in a meeting with our chief exec, and I was challenging her.
Is the son of the founder?
The son of the founder, yeah, he's our CEO. And I was just challenging one or two things. I said, listen, Adam, I said, this and this and this and this and this. 1 and 1 is not making 2, why this and whatever. And he sat back, and 2 hours later, he finished unpacking stuff that was not related to anything I have been asking him about. But in the time that he's been sharing this, I'm sitting there, said, I'm going to, no, I'm not. I'm going to, no, I'm not. I'm going, no. And it almost like I grabbed that pendulum and I said, right, I'm going to do this. And the moment when he gave me that moment, I just sat there and I said to him, whenever I am faced with situations in life that I've got no control over, and I've got absolutely no idea what to do. I said, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. He said, yeah. I said, the only thing I can do is I pray about it. And I said to him, I've never done this at all to a colleague or chief exec of a business.
So you were out on the
I was absolutely, and I said to him, so Adam, I was debating whether I should or not, and I'm going to ask you now, would you mind if we just pray about this? It's good. This has nothing to do with business or business decisions, or this is one-on-one.
Two guys talking.
I said, would you mind if I pray for you? And he said, absolutely. And because
absolutely mind or absolutely?
No, absolutely
okay.
pray. Yeah, absolutely. And I said, I took the opportunity. I prayed for him, prayed for his wife, prayed for his brothers, his sisters, their kids, his dad. I prayed for everybody. I just said, right, I've got this moment. I said, in his office. And absolutely. But it was twice, halfway through the day and late that evening, he sent me WhatsApps saying, I have got no words to thank you for what you did today. And it was one of the highlights of my career so far, in that just to have that intimate, and it wasn't that intimate between two guys, but it was just that moment we know this has been orchestrated by somebody else. And that's why I'm saying is big picture, but don't miss the small things. You're going to miss opportunities.
It reminds me a lot of, I think, where living out our faith at work is, number one is doing work excellently. It's doing that which we're paid to do, and doing it with the highest of standards and our abilities. But then there's this other part that I think our faith maybe makes us a little bit different than others, or whatever faith it might be. And that's paying attention to the human beings who are next to you, many of whom might be going through really terrible stuff. Spouse might have just been through a divorce, or a kid is really sick, or they've got bad news about their parents, or their boss is a jerk, and just offering comfort and kindness. And sometimes I think we're placed in really lousy jobs because we're meant to be a light to those people who are hurting there, until such time as we're meant to do something else. Yeah. And certainly when things are going well, all the more reason not to forget them. I'm going to ask another question, then open it up to any questions that you folks have. So do your coworkers think you're nuts? No, I mean, you don't wear it on your sleeve. We're talking about this, your faith, but they know it's a part of who you are. And is that ever become an issue, that at least from your sense, or is it you're just being yourself, doing your job, and everyone gets it?
There are two answers for me in that. In the time that I was in Africa, and it wasn't necessarily my co-workers. This was actually with the principals, the owners of the business.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time where I was engaging with one of them, and I was informed by the individual that said, "Do you know that around the campfire at night, when the rest of them are here and they've had a few drinks, that they make jokes about your faith?" And that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with. I tried to put up a brave face and then deal with it, but I went home and to Siska, my wife, and I just said, "This has been hard."
Wow. Yeah.
And I think the hardest of that was that when I eventually left Tanzania, I didn't see a change. Yes, we impacted a lot of people's lives, and we impacted the community, and it still is one of our favorite parts of our life so far. But if I think back work-wise and work community-wise, from a profit and loss perspective, I've got nothing to show. That was hard, really, really hard for me, and something I don't understand. And I actually I'd shared it with a believing friend, and it was one of those guys. He said, "Look, you've just got to accept the fact that you will probably not know now." It's one of those things. In Montego Bay at the moment, it's an interesting dynamic because everybody knows what we believe, and everybody respects it. It is very much
almost the opposite then.
Oh,
at least the second part. Yeah.
It's a community where everything though is. It doesn't matter what your faith is.
Right.
If you're a person of faith, you're deemed a person of principle, and that's respected. Respected as long as you don't try and proselytize.
Push it
So that's an interesting dynamic in Jamaica. But it's, I mean, at events, etc., when you arrive, you do sense a change in the in the conversation. Yeah, it has changed.
Well, I appreciate it. And, I really appreciate what you said about Tanzania, that painful moment. And when you take stock of those 6 or so years, was it a net gain? Did you make a difference? And I'd echo what your friend said, that one, you'll never know what seeds you planted. And two, sometimes there are arid seasons. Remember even Jesus himself, one of the lines I like, he talked about shaking the dust off his sandals and moving on to another town, that sometimes it is what it is. And maybe lastly, that's a season of preparation for what's to come that you may not realize till 10 years from now, that you'll realize, oh, that happened, so I would learn this to later be able to step up to a big moment. Yeah. So who knows? But thank you for sharing that. Thank you, and Ian, thank you.